Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Nicole. I'm from the Office for Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence at the Department of Communities. Thank you for joining us for today's monthly webinar, which is really an opportunity for us to provide updates and information about work that's happening in the department around in the area of family and domestic violence. And I think this might be our fourth webinar that we've delivered this year, and with an intention that we'll keep it going on a monthly basis, I think works out on the third Thursday of every month. So really, I guess, if I can start by acknowledging that I'm joining you today from Wallula, Pambodja, Noongar, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge that many of you may be joining us from different places all over the state, and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of those lands that you are meeting and joining us from today. In terms of the format for these webinars, essentially the way that it tends to go and the way that we try to run it is that we have about 30 minutes of presentation and then 30 minutes allocated for question and answer. Today we have a guest speaker in Claire Connie, who's the manager of Munda Maya, which is run by Serenian House. And Munda Maya is operating out of the premises that was formerly run by Esther House. And we'll get to that in a little bit and talk a little bit about that service. So really what you'll hear from us today is a little bit about some of the work that we're undertaking in the communities. You'll hear from Claire about the work that's happening out at Munda Maya. And then we'll have time for question and answer, and those questions and answers can be directed to either myself or Claire. I would encourage you to please post your questions in the chat as you think of them. And if you see a question come up that you particularly like, then please like it, and we'll just make sure to prioritise that as we are working through. I guess the other thing is that this is being recorded, and we'll send the link around for anybody who's interested in what we've had to say today but hasn't been able to make it to this time this morning. So it will be available after the fact if you have to step out and you miss some of the content. So moving, I guess, right in, really what I wanted to start with today was a little bit of just some basic updates on some work that I spoke to you about last month, and that's in relation to a few key projects that are being actively commissioned at the moment. And if I can just get the next slide up. So at the last webinar, we talked about Rapid Rehousing Initiative, which was released on Tenders WA on Monday, the 15th of August, and closed on Friday, the 9th of September. And that's a particular program, actually two programs that we are looking for a provider for that, exactly as I guess the name suggests, is about supporting women out of refuge, women and children out of refuge into private rental accommodation. The program is structured in a way that it provides for subsidised rent and potentially subsidised bond for women that are seeking to get into the private rental market as a way to support safe and stable housing after somebody's been in a refuge. There are two pilots or two programs that we are commissioning for. One is dedicated for Aboriginal women and children. So that expression of interest process has now closed, and we'll move into a process of sort of decision making and selection, with an announcement coming in the near future. The second program that's currently on Tenders WA and is still open is the primary prevention grants. So in the last election leading into that, the government announced a commitment to $3 million investment in primary prevention. So a grant round totalling in value for $3 million is currently being advertised on Tenders WA. There's quite a lot of information in that package that's on Tenders WA around what we're looking for, as well as the criteria that it will be considered in terms of allocating those grants. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. But I really, I guess, want to impress upon you that it is absolutely about primary prevention. So we're looking at initiatives that are about stopping violence before it starts. We're looking at initiatives that help to address and respond to what we know to be sort of those social conditions that make violence against women more likely. So, for example, victim blaming attitudes, gender inequality, toxic masculinity, things like that. So it is very much about that kind of really downstream approach about how we support work in our communities to embed the values and attitudes and behaviours that we know will be protective for preventing violence against women. The third program that has been released on Tenders WA just recently, and I've just noticed that there's a mistake on our slide. So it was released on Tenders WA, not on the 31st of October because we haven't got there yet, but it is on there at the moment. It's closing on the 4th of October, and that's for our youth counselling services for young people who have been exposed to or who are experiencing family and domestic violence. That particular initiative has already had the locations announced, and they are Northam in the Wheatbelt and Rockingham in the South Metro Corridor. And there is quite a substantial co-design report that goes with that. That was produced by the Australian Childhood Foundation, and all of that information is available on Tenders WA. The fourth election commitment that we've briefly touched on in previous webinars as well is around the co-design work for the Kimberley One-Stop Hub. So essentially that work is ongoing. We have consultants and staff in the Kimberley this week in Broome and Bidjadanga doing adapt and adopt workshops. So essentially building on what we've learned from previous processes of procuring one-stop hubs, but really, I guess, taking it to that next level around what is the right fit for a community like Broome, with consideration to potentially satellite operation in Derby and Bidjadanga. So that work is progressing this week. It's building on some face-to-face work that happened, I think, about 2 weeks ago, and it'll be part of a bit of an ongoing dialogue with stakeholders in that region. The other thing that we talked about at the last webinar was that the responsibilities for family and domestic violence response teams was moving to the Office for Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence. So really, I guess, the intention of what we do in the office is that all of those, moving to a place where all of those really key and essential programs and policy responses are held and carried by the Office for Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence, and or at the very least that we're providing a conduit to them, to the places that they manage within the department, so that you've really clearly got a central point of contact in the Department of Communities for any issues or programs that are family and domestic violence related. After the last webinar, we, I guess, had the opportunity to speak to some people about how what their experience of the family and domestic violence response teams is, how things have generally been going, how things are going out in the regions, as well as just in terms of a general sort of governance and management area. And I guess what we sort of heard is that there's probably different levels of information available in our stakeholder base and in the teams themselves about a range of things related to the response teams, including the review process, the redesign, and the forward direction. So what we undertook to do was to run an online forum, which we had scheduled for the 22nd of September, though now that that is a public holiday, we've had to reschedule to the 11th of October, really to try and get everybody on the same page with the same base level of understanding about what is happening in this space. So the forum, as I said, will be on the 11th of October. It will go through the review, it'll go through sort of the redesign process and the enhancements that we're working towards around the response teams. It will talk about the role of FDBRT Central, which is the team that's based with me, and the future governance arrangements. Given that we've had to put the forum back, what we are intending to do is to give you the slide deck that we were going to present on the 22nd, so that there's not another delay and another lag on this information being available. So we'll have that information and the slides go out on the 22nd, so that if you've got an opportunity, you can read through and sort of get that understanding just based on what we give you in the slides, but then we'll go through it and provide much more opportunity to talk about it on the 11th of October. So that is sort of what's happening next in the FDBRT response, and then from there we'll be able to start talking to people about hopefully a really clear plan for how we're carrying all of this work forward. The next, I guess, project that I wanted to give you an update on, which is something that we always update on in these webinars, is how we're progressing with the commissioning work for family and domestic violence services. So this slide and the next one are exactly the same as what we've presented previously. So I'm not going to go through them in a lot of detail, but I just want to keep that continuity of background so that if anybody's listening today that hasn't had the opportunity to join us before, then there's that context and background available to you. But essentially, we're doing our commissioning work in 2 phases in the family and domestic violence space. The first phase is about funding sustainability for refuges and safe houses. And then the second phase being the much more strategic piece of work around kind of about, what we want to do with our existing service group, as well as what the priorities for further and future investment would be to get towards our ideal state and get towards a clearer understanding of how we're working in a way that is meeting the outcomes that we've set around victim survivor safety and perpetrator accountability. So I'm going to ask my team actually to move down 2 slides. And what I'm going to talk to you about is how we're progressing with this work. And some of it you will have heard before as well, but I'll give you an update on where we're at now and what has been done over the last month and where to next. But essentially, as many of you would know, informing and guiding this work is an expert reference group comprised of representatives from the family and domestic violence sector. So the 2 peak bodies in stopping family violence and the Centre for Women's Safety and Wellbeing are on the group, as well as the chairperson for the centre in Donna Chung. And we've got a range of different service providers also involved, including many who are running refuges and safe houses. So that expert reference group has now met on 4 occasions. The first 2 meetings were a bit more administrative around setting the scope and parameters for the work, but then we've had 2 fairly in-depth workshops, one about both the justification for increasing funding in this sector and essentially what the risks and issues are of operating in the current funding envelopes. And then the second workshop being about building a cost model. So how do we actually understand what the cost of operating these services is, and is there a way that we can build a scalable model of cost that we apply over the sector to inform what the appropriate funding level should be, understanding that there are big caveats on that because not all of our services operate to the same model. So it's not about standardised delivery, it's just about ways of evidencing cost that are systematic that we can then scale up, down, around for different ways of operating and different types of service models. We've also been doing a piece of work around data analysis, and that's really about taking the information we have to hand from specialist homelessness services data collection, annual progress reports, which help to reiterate that picture around demand, client complexity, and the types of work and activities that occur in refuge and safe house services. We've done some visual mapping of services and their capacity in terms of geography, where they're located and what they're doing. I really wanted to thank everybody for getting back to us on the census. We've had such a fantastic response and really a quick response as well. And really what we were asking people for in the census is to help fill a gap in information that we have about, what does the current contract say and how are people doing their best to manage that in their current funding envelope. So getting to a level of information about what does shifts look like, what do staffing structures look like, how are you managing demand, what is the real term capacity of the service, understanding that many of you operate transitional properties that aren't captured in a formal or systematic way in your contracts. So it really is very helpful for us to very clearly articulate actually what the current state of play is. So we're working through an analysis of that census information that you've given back to us. And we held 2 workshops with the sector on the 8th and 12th of September. And those were run by a consultant, Social Ventures Australia, who's been working with us on this. And what those workshops did is build on the discussions of the expert reference group. It was an opportunity for us to confirm what we had heard in the ERG, but then to build on it as well. And actually the level of additional detail and nuance that we got out of those workshops was just excellent. So Again, a big thank you to everybody that was a part of it. I guess what I would like to say about next steps is that we've spent quite a lot of time, particularly over the last 6 weeks, talking to people, running workshops, engaging on the issues. And really, I guess what we intend to do now is probably just to get back behind the computer in a way and actually start writing some of it up and producing the content into ways that we can test as drafts. So the next time that you hear from us, we'll come back to you with examples or options or a draft to do that further, a next step of refinement. So we feel, we've been so lucky to get the incredible information we have. We really just need to take that time now to actually start pulling it together to get to a point where we can come back and test it with you again. The other thing I would say though is that we are going to do a bit of work with our colleagues in other states and territories, really to try and get an understanding of the landscape of funding for refuges and safe houses around the country. So in terms of their funding level, in terms of their model, in terms of their number, like how many are operating, but also we'll take that opportunity to start to test and understand change and innovation and growth in that sector that we can see in other places as well. So, and I guess really all this is leading into the 23-24 budget process. So there is a hard deadline on this work for us in terms of having it done, and that is around mid-December. We need to have our submission ready for government, both articulating what the forward cost is, as well as the justification for that. So that's really what we're working towards in that space. So if I can just remind you that if you've got any questions, please post them in the chat and we'll circle back to them during the Q&A at the end of the session. And also please feel free to ask questions about any projects or programs that you know are going on that I haven't updated you on today. I'm really happy to talk about any of our programs of work. I guess I've just picked out the things that I thought you might be most interested in that have some time critical sensitivities. The last thing that I wanted to update you on before we hand over to Claire is really, I guess, just a reminder that 16 Days in WA is coming up. As you all know, it operates between the 25th of November and the 10th of December, which is the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. This year, the theme is Ending Violence Against Women, It's Everybody's Business. And I've just put a couple of links there, one to the information that's available on our website, and the second to the information about the Memorial March, which is run by the Centre for Women's Safety and Wellbeing. I guess in terms of 16 Days in WA, what you can expect from us is that we're working towards, by the end of this month or early into October, so like after the school holidays, is that we'll be able to start disseminating our resources to support any activities or events that you're wanting to run in terms of 16 Days in WA. So things like the stakeholder kit, the example sort of branding and collateral, infographics that you might want to use, overlays or sort of banners for emails, that type of thing. So after the school holidays, you'll start to, on a fairly regular basis, start to get information and material from us that you may be able to use or that you might want to use in your own activities during that 16-day period. And I think I have said to you before, and I guess I'll just say it again, but if you are planning something and you had wanted the Minister to attend, then I would strongly encourage you to get in contact with her office sooner rather than later, because things get booked out very quickly. So that's just a little prompt on that one. Okay, so that is everything that I was going to talk to you about this morning, but as I said, very happy to answer questions on any of our projects during the Q&A period. I'm actually going to hand over to Claire now, who's the manager of Munda Maya, which is operated by Serenian House. And if I can just offer a brief bit of background, you would all be aware that earlier in this year, the services that were formerly operated by Esther House ceased. I think they ceased around late May. And the Department of Community's understanding that this was going to create a significant gap in service delivery, but also understanding that the premises that service was operating from had such great potential. Really, we wanted to stand up an interim service for a 2-year period to give an opportunity to demonstrate the value that we could get out of both that premises and a service model that caters to that client group, which is young women, but particularly young women who are very vulnerable. So young women who may be misusing substances, escaping family violence, at risk of homelessness, or have other sort of complex needs and traumas. So Claire, if I can hand over to you to talk a little bit about the service and how it's going.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me here. So yeah, it's been an amazing few months. As said, we took over in May this year, and it really has been incredible. And so when we were asked to come in, you know, there was still some residents from the ESTA program that were still here, and staffing here as well. So we, you know, first and foremost wanted to ensure that the residents that were here and the staff were safe, they felt secure, and they had an understanding of what was going on and what was happening. So Munda Maya, so what we've done, we've pretty much changed everything in a sense. You know, and as said, so I wanted to make sure that our program is remains a women's program. Women in our program, so we're a 20 adult bed facility, and the women here have the opportunity to bring in their children, which we're capping at the age of 5 and under, just because of facilities. Any older children, it doesn't, the building really isn't sort of that fit for them. Luckily enough, we do have another women's and children's program in Serenian, which is called the Serrana Women and Children's Program, which is based at our residential site in Cullacabuddy, which is like Ellenbrook, where we accept children up to the age of 12. So, and it's a different facility, so that's where we refer to. So yeah, so the program itself. So the first thing that we did was really wanted to introduce the therapeutic community model, the TC. I won't go too much into TCs unless you want me to, because I could talk about TCs all day. But the therapeutic community model, it's a different model and it's a different modality, and it was a very different modality from what the ESTA program was presenting. But the therapeutic community model, I mean, not only is it evidence-based and it's got, you know, they're all over the world, but it's such a beautiful model in the sense that we call it community as method. So the idea that residents are helping residents in their recovery, and it just lends itself so well, particularly for women in, you know, in terms of supporting each other, you know, creating that support network, and really, you know, really amazing therapy can happen here because, you know, first and foremost, we are a therapy, you know, we offer therapy. So introducing the therapeutic community model, introducing the new processes, the new systems, the procedures, you know, was really exciting, you know, and I have to say all the staff were really, the ones that we, you know, have stayed on, were so receptive to this new model. So yeah, it's really beautiful. Again, I can talk about TC all day if you have any other questions, but yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, so we're based in Kalamunda. The property itself is beautiful. Property management is huge, but we're getting there. So yeah, so we're women and children. So the program itself, what we wanted to do was to ensure that, you know, we've taken some program elements from our other residential sites, but we wanted to create a unique and, you know, specific tailored program for our residents that are going to be coming in and children. So one of the main kind of questions we needed to ask ourselves is what do we need to tailor and change and modify to ensure that we're meeting the women who are going to be coming to us. And because we have women and children and women without children on the program, on the property, we had to make that. So really the kind of theme that we plant is that equity versus equality. You know, we have to treat people differently in order to treat them the same. And one of the things we did as well was our program is, I suppose, technically a 32-week program, but really we can have women stay here for, we have women stay here for up to about, you know, up to a year or more. We are a staged program, and with every stage you get more privileges but more responsibilities. And it is staged for a reason, and it introduces that, that reintegration into the wider community. And again, we had to make it so that, women with children on the property were still getting the same program elements, but also more flexibility to attend to their children and be mum, that sort of thing. So we gave ourselves a longer and a more flexible timeline. Because something that's new for Serenian House is that we are going to be admitting women here from the age of 16 and up. Typically all Serenian services have been 18 and up. So again, we had to kind of flip the script and say, how do we meet a minor's needs? And, of course, keeping the lens of family and domestic violence, homelessness, mental health, parenting, and of course, drug and alcohol. We had to really, we had to make the changes so that we're giving a really great service, and again, meeting the needs of our clients. So, of course, a lot of our women have CPFS involvement, and of course, keeping, one, we know that retention rates for women, if they can have their children on with them in treatment, the retention rates are just so much better. I used to work at Serana. I've seen this at Serana, and also knowing that then their babies are safe and secure. They're in a beautiful structured environment. They're with mum. There's really just, not a lot wrong about it, really. So we do have a lot of CPF. Typically, women with children have CPF involvement here, and we do want to also support, things like reunification, visits, all of that, anything that we can do to support, that bond and being family inclusive, we definitely want to do. The lens around family and domestic violence is a very, very strong one. So how we kind of want to ensure that we're hitting that. One, all of our staff are trained around family and domestic violence, and every intervention in a TC, everything we do, we want to do for a therapeutic reason and a beneficial reason. That is kind of our guidance. We're not here to be punitive. And ultimately, it is about behaviour change. That's, what we kind of look at when we talk about drug and alcohol therapy and treatment. So we also ask ourselves, whenever we intervene or we're stepping in, what is our reasoning, being really sure that we're clear of our rationale, and making sure that it is that in that family and domestic lens as well. So that's really important. We've designed the program, pretty much the majority of our psychoeducation. So I've also got a timetable that I sent if we want to have a look through that as well. We do a lot of different groups. There are group therapy. It's not really group therapy, but group work is it's a very big component of being in a therapeutic community. We actually only do individual counselling formally once a fortnight. But of course we're available for our residents all the time. We're staffed 24/7. But the reason that we only do formal counselling quite rarely is because the community and that group space, living together, cooking together, all that's therapeutic community mode. But one of the groups we do is a psychoeducation group. And we cover a lot of different topics, from things like assertive communication, boundaries, family of origin, that sort of thing. But then we also cover things like attachment, adult attachment, family and domestic violence, including, things like coercive control. All of that is it's throughout our entire program. Of course, relapse prevention, triggers, that sort of thing. It's a very, very strong focus for our education groups. We also do circle of security here as well. That was a group that we decided that both mums and women without children on the property, or even women without children, all attend that group, because again, anything around attachment is just so valuable in our eyes, and I'm sure in your eyes too. And of course, then there are other kind of things like, keeping the address as confidential as possible. you know, things like doing a weekend plans group. So we're talking about who's coming onto the property, who's coming not, you know, who's not going to be coming onto the property, security, that sort of thing. Yeah, I feel like I'm jumping all over the shop, but I'm hoping I'm kind of giving you a bit of an idea. I suppose the other thing that's really important here is that we do have, sorry, I'm jumping back to the counselling element, only because in some TCs, they don't do counselling, they only do case management, which is very, very valuable as well. But I really value counselling. I am a counsellor by trade, so we also do, you know, trauma-informed and trauma therapy. So just, you know, because we know, of course, that we're, you know, we see the devastating effects, and yeah, just try to heal some of that, you know, some of that work with them. We are a female staff team, and we're staffed 24/7, but we do have overnight staff and weekend staff. We made the decision, and I am, you know, open to having men work here. It's not about that. You know, I think women learning healthy, safe, boundary appropriate, you know, men is very useful as well. But we made the decision to only have female staff sleep over. Again, just for that security, safety, you know, for if resident needs to have a chat in the middle of the night, that just feels, you know, it's a secure space for them. And yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's our beautiful property on screen now. So the kind of convent, which was a convent, that is one space of accommodation bedrooms. And then you can see the studios in the back. They are studios, so that's more accommodation there. So yeah, very, very beautiful. I suppose, do you want, I can talk about the referral process as well, if that would be helpful. Okay, so really our clients really in all of Serenian are self-referred. Of course, that can be help from, you know, CPFS or, you know, wherever. But really it's a self-referred process. We do on occasion get the mandated kind of client, but it's not that often because we have our own programs in prison. So it's self-referred. So what happens then? So let's say the client calls our head office in North Perth, our central office, and they say, hello, I want to go to residential treatment. From there, they get referred to our team called the RPP team, the Residential Pathway Program team. I'm sure like us, you have a million acronyms, and that's one of them. And they conduct an assessment, and we also do their children assessments, and we will also now be doing, you know, minor assessments if they're 16 and up. They do an assessment, and really, I mean, I can tell you, there's really not a lot, grain of salt, that precludes someone from residential treatment. Again, we understand behaviours. That's what we're here to work on, and we're here to change. There are some things that will hold up someone coming into treatment, which is always the question on our, you know, that we're asking is, why do we have empty beds when we know that there's so much demand for it? So a couple of the hold-ups would be detox is one of them. So we are an abstinence-based program, meaning that we, you know, no one is using while they're in our centre. We do teach harm, and that's one, like, kind of one model. We do teach harm minimisation skills as well. But as I say, when people are here, they're not using. So detox can be one of the bottlenecks. Depending on what they're using, how much, you know, yada yada, we'll either send them to next step for a medical detox, or we have 2 low medical units as part of, well, 3 actually. One's in Nannup, because we have a therapeutic community down in Nannup as well. But we have a low med detox, one at Serenity Lodge, which is in Rockingham, and one at Midland, which is pure, it's not got a TC attached to it, purely just detox. So again, depending on, yeah, how much they're using for how long, yada yada, they get assessed by nurses, and then if they can fit the low med detox, great, and then we do a direct transfer into treatment. The other thing that can hold people up is pay. So people do pay to, so the residential sites are the only part of Serenian where we get clients to pay. All of our other services are free. How it typically looks in a residential site is that they're typically on Centrelink, and we take 80% of their Centrelink, which seems like a lot, and I suppose it is, but it covers their board, their food, lodgings, everything, their treatment, all of that. So often getting the Centrelink set up can be quite tricky at times. But again, that's what the RPP team do. As soon as you've contacted RPP and you're with them, they will be case management. Then they'll be helping the client do that work. So if they need Centrelink, they're helping them there. If they need to get their cat into a cattery, they'll help them there, whatever it is, so that all those things are tied up. So by the time someone arrives in treatment, they can land, they're in, and they can sort of, we kind of call it like a full-time job. You're in, this is kind of what your main focus is going to be, at least for a little while. We also can, so Renee's my clinical coordinator, we also are available and open to doing assessments either here on our property in Kalamunda, or we don't mind kind of going out, depending on how far, and doing, if there was a client at, say, CPFS there who wanted an assessment, or even, Midland Hospital. I've gone into hospitals before and conducted assessments, which is something I'm really open to do, because again, we know that it can be really hard for people to reach out, and it can feel like there's so many hurdles. So any way that we can help that, we can do that as well. I think that's about it. I hope I've kind of given you a bit of an idea.
Thanks, Claire. It was really good. And I'm actually going to ask you a question, and then we'll open up for our Q&A. So talk a little bit about the therapeutic community, including like a case management component. So for somebody who might be accessing Munda Maya with current safety issues around family and domestic violence, would the case management be inclusive of that safety work that might need to occur that secures them where they are in that moment, but also potentially when they exit or, back into the community?
Yes, absolutely. So we do, you're right. We do work under a case management model. So family and domestic violence. So what that kind of looks like is like, we ask the client, what are their goals for therapy? And FDV is one that we will always have there and name. So talking about what their concerns are, what their risks are. And again, then, if they're looking at exiting, looking at their safety planning, exit planning, that sort of thing. One of the things that we do ask clients to have, which we know can be really difficult, is even before they get into Munda Maya, when they're doing their initial assessment, we're asking them what their exit plan is. So if they are planning, if they decide that they want to leave treatment, which we know happens, or, they have to leave, what is the plan? Where are they going? Do they have somewhere? What is their game plan? So absolutely, exit planning, safety planning, and that is part of our ed groups as well.
Thanks, Claire. That's great. Thank you so much for being available today and for talking to us about the service. It's been really excellent, and I just see that there's such a potential for this service to work in really closely with particularly our metropolitan refuges and family violence services, but then also potentially services that are sort of proximal to the metropolitan area, particularly that are trying to support young women with a range of complex presenting issues. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask my team now to walk us through the Q&A. So team, we've got 4 questions at the moment.
Okay, so the first one's for you, Nicole. When will the expression of interest for Kimberley Hub be open on Tenders WA? A rough time would be great.
Oh, that's a very good question. So the expression of interest for the Kimberley One-Stop Hub will not be released on Tenders WA until next year. So it's not something that's going to be imminently out there in terms of before Christmas. There is a process that we need to run through around the budget. So really, I guess the sequence of events for us is design, then based on the design, confirmation of budget, and then once we've secured the budget, then starting that procurement process, which will be an open competitive tender. So the tender process will be after our budget process, which would be sort of second quarter of next year, if I had to give a rough indication, but I can come back on that with a more precise timeline.
Next one's for you as well, Nicole. Building the cost model is an excellent initiative. can the broader sector also see and contribute to that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So I think the answer is absolutely yes. We'll be happy to share it and discuss it widely, and perhaps we make that the focus of our next webinar is to give a preview to that and how we're progressing with it, and then we can figure out, you know, sort of what's next from an engagement point of view and people's interest and want in being a part of those discussions. So, and I say next webinar because we just need to do a bit of that work ourselves in-house to form it up before we take it out to people.
And this is another one for you, Nicole. Do we know when the outcome from the business case on refuge funding will be known?
Mm-hmm.
And if it is approved, when is it proposed to commence from?
Yeah, so the budget outcome, so budget works in a fairly standard order of events. So for a department like the Department of Communities, we need to have all of our submissions ready before Christmas, but then there's, I guess, a process in getting them to a decision-making point. So usually we have outcomes on the budget process in March, and usually the money that comes through is from 1 July. So we're talking about a 23-24 budget process, so money from 1st of July 23, but we know the outcome in March. So there are variances on that. There's, you know, there's some things that we can think about in that space, but that's usually, you know, what we're talking about.
And then the next question is for you, Claire. Is the therapeutic community model the same as a sanctuary framework?
Good question. I'm not very familiar with the sanctuary framework, if I'm being honest, but I can talk about the TC model and the CAM model, and I suppose what that would make different to, I suppose, why we call ourselves a therapeutic community and not a rehab. So again, the community as method model is again this idea that the residents are the agent of change. It's not like clinician-led, it's community-led. So what that means is, again, that the residents, the fact that they live together, cook together, go to group together, this sort of thing, they're part of each other's treatment. So I'm helping you see stuff that you can't see, you're helping me see stuff that I can't see. And then there's the values that kind of, and I think all of us will be working around these values, but these kind of pro-social values around accountability, responsibility, you know, self-worth, and, you know, taking ownership and empowerment, transparency, all, and the idea is that, like, really it should be kind of self-running. So if we were to kind of give them the keys, the place should kind of be okay, we would hope. And what that means for staff is that we refer to us, it's called a rational authority. So, like, yeah, we make the ultimate decisions, but really we hand so much stuff back to the residents, and particularly for women, it is just so beautiful to see this empowerment, and they start to take ownership, and this self-worth and self-efficacy all gets promoted at the same time that they're building their home. So yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't know much about the sanctuary model, but if that aligns in any way for you, I can only imagine there'd be some similar kind of values underlying. I can tell you that for us, our main kind of governing body is called ATCA, which is Australasian Therapeutic Communities Association. There's a lot of we get audited regularly. There's a lot of things we have to hit in order to be able to call ourselves a TC. And again, that's what differs us from a rehab, and I suppose the more typical kind of medical model, which we kind of take a bit of, kind of, but not really. Yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Thanks, Claire. That's great. Emma, do we have any more questions?
Just one more's coming for Claire. If mum has several children and is single, what does she do with a 13-year-old?
Yeah, look, that is such a good question. And these are questions we ask ourselves as well. I mean, look, probably what I would do is I would advocate for her, and I would probably be trying to refer her to Sarana, where again, we say, like, the cutoff is 12, but really, again, we always want to be working in the best interest of the child, and of course the best interest of mum. So you know, and I can't be for certain, but really that's what I would be doing. I'd be advocating to try to get her into Sarana with all her children. The hard thing is that I suppose we aren't really typically a refuge. So and we're also not like a crisis centre. So that does kind of, and again, when we talk about what are the preclusions, that, you know, it does make things really tricky at times. You know, we have to really be asking ourselves, why would we be saying, like, we want to start from a place of yes. Why, you know, what can we do to say yes to this person coming in? So yeah, look, it's a good question, but if they were calling Sarana in-house, I would be saying, let's talk to Sarana and see if there's anything we could help them there with, yeah.
And can I say, I guess just interject there, like, it's unlikely that someone under the age of 25 is going to have a 13-year-old. So I guess this is where this interplay with Wallumbiddy comes in as well. So Wallumbiddy is a therapeutic refuge that we have in the Peel region, which is very much about supporting women and children escaping family and domestic violence that may also be presenting with substance misuse or alcohol and other drug issues or mental health issues. So, you know, I guess part of the point of this conversation is to understand what all the different resources are that are available to hand, to be thinking about how we support some of the most vulnerable people in our community. And you know, if Mundamaya isn't the right fit, then what does that referral pathway look like to Wallumbiddy, or as you've said, to Sarana as another option, and you know, kind of having processes in place to be able to navigate that and work it out.
I've got another question for you, Claire. Is there a maximum age for women?
No, we no, we accept, like, yeah, 16 and up. So you know, there could be a chance where a 13-year-old child would present with a mum. But no, really, I mean, when I worked at Serenity, I had a client who was 71, I think, coming into treatment. So yeah, I think, you know, typically we would want to keep our lens on the more kind of younger, yeah, but no, I would be happy to accept 16 and up.
And is there support post-exit?
Yes. So this kind of through care idea. So in taking over this property, taking over Esther, we inherited a cafe, which is new for Ceridian, but also really cool because then our residents can go work in the cafe, which is amazing. But we also inherited 4 transition houses, and we've kept 2 of those transition houses, which are in this hills area. Ceridian also has, I think we're up to 9 other transition houses. We're hoping that these houses that we've inherited in the hills, we want to kind of really keep them perhaps as a woman only. And there is actually one that has a granny flat, which would be great for a mum and child to live there. So yeah, we call it FAS, Transition Housing and Support Program. So we have all these transition houses all over the metro area, and we've also got one down in the Nannup region as well, which is incredible. So that's one, but also a lot of people, you know, don't want to go to FAST, that's fine too. So then it's about, yeah, making sure that we do exit planning really from day one. You know, we want to be having that conversation very, very early on in the piece. We also all know that housing can be a really, really difficult thing to navigate. So thinking about, yeah, their housing, where they're going to live, if they have that or not, and we can help them apply for those things. If they have housing, then we can also, if they want to continue, I suppose, counselling or therapy, we refer back to our central site or to any other service as well. Or we also have a lot of groups that happen out of our central site as well, so that can happen if they're interested in that. We also then really value volunteers, and we also have another program which is our peer lived experience program. So people who have the lived experience, they become peer workers, which is again just invaluable for us. So yeah, but again, the main concern that we hit up against, you guys probably do too, is the housing. You know, we are making links with other sort of FDV services, making those referral pathways between us, those warm referrals, women's health, that sort of thing. But yeah, so we absolutely want to offer that support as much as we can. Housing is the biggest nightmare. Yeah.
Okay. So that's actually the end of the questions today. So before I wind up, Claire, I just wondered if there was anything else you wanted to say before I kind of wrap up and finish up the webinar.
No, just thank you so much for having me. It's been really interesting hearing everything as well. And look, I just want to open up to you guys. If anyone ever wants to come for a visit, if you do want to talk about referrals, please email me. We're definitely wanting to get our name out there. Get this service. We want our beds full. If we could have a wait list, I would love that. So more than happy. And if you want to come see the property itself, sometimes it's helpful just to have a vision of where you're sending your clients, what the space looks like. So yeah, please feel free to email me, contact me. Really, really happy to be a part of.
Thank you, Claire. That's great. So I'm going to wrap up the webinar now. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Like normal, we will, once we've got the recording, I guess, a little bit just cleaned up into an appropriate sort of file size, we'll send that around to everybody along with the slides. And if you've got any questions or if anything comes up in between now and the next webinar, then please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me, and I'll either address your questions right there and then, or we can add the topic to the next webinar and make sure that we're addressing it off in a detailed way for everybody. So so thank you for those of you that have joined us today, and we'll see you next time.